Hey everyone, James Azar here with the CyberHub podcast. We are ready. We are going on our second Tech Corner. I've got an old guest coming to join me for the second episode. James.
Hey,
James.
old guest?
Oh, well, you've been on the show once before. Before you were
Yeah.
at No Before. See, do you like
Yes.
that pun on words?
There you go. There you go.
James McQuiggen, folks, he is the security awareness advocate at Know Before, one of our partners here at CyberHub Podcast. We're grateful for their support. Very, very happy to have you on today, James. How's it hanging in lovely Florida?
Well, we got a bit of rain weather going on here, but not as sunny as it usually is. But other than that, keeping busy. The lots of activity going on in the cyber world. So that's keeping me busy, and life at Know Before is fantastic. It was a little bittersweet having to hang up my hat from Siemens, but this opportunity of being with Know Before and getting to educate more people is fantastic. It's almost, I would pretty well call it my dream job.
See, I love hearing that about people. My dream job, my passion.
Yeah.
There's something so few people in this world do what they love.
Right. Yep.
So
being
few
able to
people.
get up in the morning and know that I'm either going to write something that's going to educate somebody, or it's going to be a webinar, or, hey, it could be a podcast. But presenting to people, talking to people. Yeah, it's just being able to educate. And that's one of the reasons that teaching at the college here in Orlando at Valencia College is so good as well, because it's getting that next generation of students coming out into the workforce in a couple of years, get them ready and get them up to speed is important, and just kind of gives me the opportunity to give back to this industry that's taken care of me, and so now it's kind of being able to pass it along, pay it forward, so to speak.
Pay it forward indeed.
Yep.
We're going to talk about the evolution of ransomware today, folks. A very, very important topic, because if you open any cybersecurity website, you look at any cybersecurity paper, ransomware is increasing. These gangs have gotten extremely sophisticated. Almost scary is their level of sophistication at this point. And I think we're starting to notice one thing about this, James, which is ransomware isn't going away. It pays. They're making money out of it.
Yes, they are. Yep.
They're making money out of it, and they're making a lot of money.
They are. I mean, the average, what is it now? The report I saw the other day, the average ransomware is about $111,000, and that's going to vary depending on an organization. But in the grand scheme of things, the ransom itself, over $100,000. It used to be, something where it'd be a couple $100 a system. But now the big groups that are out there, they are out in full force, getting into as many networks, into as many organizations, and no longer just the drive-by, hit them with encryption, all right, go ahead and pay us kind of thing. Now it's, we're going to leak your data if you don't pay us. So they're looking for more and more ways to get crafty so they can increase their revenue stream as well. Which you got to think, if everybody's suffering, what have we got? 20% now unemployment in the U.S., people losing their jobs. You got to imagine the criminals out there. They're these teams, these groups that are out there. They're thinking, all right, how else are we going to make money? So they're certainly they're upping their game. They're evolving from what it just used to be just a few years ago, especially in the last 6 months. It's the ransomware game is changing a lot.
The ransomware game is definitely getting so much more. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, awesome. We just had a little thing here where you got kicked off the screen for those watching. Really, so the production board, for whatever reason, did a reset here. But
Okay.
it's technology nowadays. You guys,
Hey.
I just want to remind you, Zoom. Okay, that's all I need to say. Zoom. that typically tends to get people back in like you're, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when the whole thing hit with Zoom, I'm like, relax, folks. It's not as bad as what you're thinking. It came down to just kind of configure it properly. I always laugh thinking years ago when I was doing network security and people would say, hey, we got a firewall, we're secure. And then I'd be like, did you configure it?
What?
What? Yeah, I got to configure it. Yeah. And so, and I think nowadays the cloud is that way. Everybody moves up to the cloud and think they're all secure. And then we hear about all these different attacks of exposed data that's out there in these buckets and containers and everything else. We put it in the cloud. We should have been secure. Did you configure it? So, yeah. Same thing applied with Zoom. I like Zoom. I'm a big proponent of it. I'll back it.
I'll back any company where the CEO comes out and takes full responsibility for their security issues.
Yep.
Steps up to the plate. And by the way, let's just be quite frank about this. And this is not about the evolution of ransomware real quick, but we should... I'm going to have this conversation. James, you represent KnowBe4. You may or may not want to be a part of this. That is at your discretion. James's views for this next segment here real quick is his own. I will say this right now. They have nothing to do with KnowBe4. We as cybersecurity people have a disease where we let the media label bad guys as hackers instead of cyber criminals, because we all know hackers and they're our friends. They're good people. Yep. They're amazing. They contribute a ton to the community. They're unbelievable. We mock companies that go through a cyber incident. I won't even say a breach. I'll say a cyber incident.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then we don't do well in educating and giving props to companies that do it right. And every company that isn't in a headline because of a cyber incident is doing something right, and those people should be saluted, respected, and heard from because they're doing something right and there's something to learn from them, which is why I do the CISO Talk podcast, right? Because those are the unsung heroes.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when they come out and they put a halt on all new features and they're spending the next 90 days securing, they took the right steps, and there were still people out there continuing to slam them. But they recognized they had some issues. They brought in some new talent, whether people thought the talent was good, but they brought in the new talent to take care of it. You touched on something there that, about hackers. You and I, we both know a lot of hackers out there. There's the good ones, the bad ones, the white, the gray, the black hats. And something that with my writing, and something that I won't say struggle with, but I kind of debate in my head back and forth is, what do we call these? We say they're criminals, but a criminal is somebody that's been convicted. Is it a criminal group, a criminal hacker? It always cracks me up when people call them threat actors. And I'm like, okay, but that means they're acting like a threat? Because my background. I come out of the theater world where I worked for 6 years, long time ago. So from an acting perspective, calling them actors, I'm like, that's almost a little, that's almost as bad as trying to call them hackers. But I digress. But I always think it's interesting to come up with, a good term to what we call these groups, these teams, criminal groups, criminal teams.
So you bring up I think what is a very legitimate question, which is, what do we call them? I call them cyber criminals. I call them cyber criminals because that's what they are. They're cyber criminals. They use the cyber realm, but they are criminals. Their intent is criminal. Their purpose of activity online is coming from a criminal intent. They say the difference between murder 1 and murder 2 is intent.
Yep. We know about that now.
If you haven't been educated on it, apparently there's also Murder 3. I can't remember an episode of Law and Order with Murder 3. I can't remember, what was his name? I forgot the district attorney in Law and Order.
Jack McCoy.
Jack McCoy saying, we're going to charge him with Murder 3. No, it's Murder 1 or Murder 2. And so
Murder 3, I think, is if it was, it's not intentful. It was, if you had an argument with somebody and you grabbed your gun and you shot them, like the heat of the moment. That's Murder 3.
But that brings us to
I'm not a lawyer, by the way.
None of us are lawyers. Nothing that we say can be interpreted as legal. Here's our disclaimer. Take that and run with it.
Yeah, right.
We're done with this. Now back to the idea of cyber criminals, because that's what they really are. Cyber criminals, it takes us to the evolution of ransomware, which is it's a crime.
Yeah.
Ransomware is a crime in every single aspect of it. It is ransomware is a form of crime. We've all been witnesses to some crime or even done so ourselves, whether intentionally or not. Right. Most kids can attribute something in their life, where they stole a candy bar from a store. Right? Like, you go to a job interview and they always ask you that stupid question, like, tell me one thing you did. Have you ever stolen before? No. Really? Okay, fine. Have you ever taken a stapler from an office? Do you consider that stealing? I love that question.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It comes right down to where your morals are and your ethics. Oy
correct.
Vey.
And
yeah. And it's important, but
oy vey. Oy vey is indeed the word to be used there. I can tell you're from Florida. You've pretty much got the Yiddish down. Like there's 4 languages in Florida. There's Northern Florida, Southern Florida accent. There's Central Florida's kind of Floridian.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's South Florida. And that's Spanish.
Yep.
And Yiddish.
Yeah. The thing I love about Florida is the more north you go in Florida, the more southern it gets.
People don't know that. People all think all of Florida is like Miami. No.
No. Yeah, especially when you get up into the Panhandle too, up to Pensacola, that area.
Yeah, so, that's southern.
That's southern Florida.
Those are people from Alabama that moved somewhere.
Yep, you're right there on the border. Yep.
They've gone somewhere. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of ransomware. So we have this. We've already described cyber criminals as people whose pure online intent is to create crime. And I'm going to not start with the basics of ransomware, because I think anyone listening to our podcast today would know a little bit about ransomware.
Do you know when the first ransomware came out?
1980 something.
Ooh, close. 1989.
1989. I thought so.
Yep. Yeah. It was basically a guy by the name of Joseph Pop. He went to a World Health Organization's AIDS conference and was giving out floppy disks that had information about AIDS. And if the disk was left in the computer, I think after it reached 90 times, it then hid and encrypted the directories of the users on the C drive. They had to send $189 to his corporation, which was a PO box in Panama. So they were able to pretty well overcome it because the cryptography wasn't very difficult. They arrested him too, but he played the insanity card in court. He did some really, really weird things. Judge ruled him unfit to stand trial, and he got off. So, but yeah, that was the first one. He gave out 20,000 of these discs. It was kind of bizarre, but that was 89. And then you really didn't have anything until, I think, 2006. You had what was it? Archivius or something like that. He encrypted the My Documents folder, and then you had to pay. But the problem was he'd use the same encryption. So once somebody broke it, then it was useless. So, so those are your kind of your early forms. I think ransomware really started taking off when you had Bitcoins coming along, because the trick with all the ransomware, you think about it, is how do you get paid? How do you hold something ransom and then get money that can't be traced? And so Bitcoin comes along and explodes, and anonymous wallets, and now people can go, hey, here we go. And so that kind of came around with 2013. You had CryptoLocker.
Let's push back on that a little bit, James.
All right. Okay.
Bitcoins are not anonymous.
No, Bitcoin is not. But the wallet, getting the wallet set up can hide your identity and hide who you are.
Correct, but I can monitor. So this is not unknown. And if you're a cyber criminal and you're listening to us and you go, holy shit, they now know. Yeah, we know, asshole. We know. So you're right in one aspect where there's some level of anonymity in a Bitcoin. You make it harder for people to track you down, but you're not anonymous. Eventually, you're going to buy something from Amazon.
Right, with that Bitcoin.
With that Bitcoin. Well, because Amazon doesn't take Bitcoin. So eventually, you're going to take that Bitcoin and you're going to translate it to cash somewhere.
Yep.
And the beauty of blockchain, the evolution of blockchain has gained popularity, is it's an open ledger. And like all things on ledger, when you move item A from this ledger to that ledger, there is a track of sorts.
Yeah.
It's not like a Hollywood movie. We transfer money to one bank account, and then the money's been transferred to 700 different bank accounts in the Caymans and in Mauritius and Cyprus and Geneva and Panama and Colombia and Brazil, and we don't know where the money is. Not exactly. I mean, I agree with what you say is there's a level of anonymity to it. I think the rise of ransomware started with Stuxnet.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I remember Stuxnet. I was right in the middle of it, but yeah.
But I mean, but think of Stuxnet. Stuxnet was the mother of every single ransomware strain that comes out today is based off of something in Stuxnet.
Yeah, so your Stuxnet had your 40 days, right? Or 60 days, sorry. But Stuxnet was interesting because of the fact that it was targeted, it was designed specifically to damage a certain country's nuclear program. And so it was extremely targeted. It was designed to stick around for a while, even if some of the 0 days they used got fixed. But I think more with ransomware comes in and it's looking to make you're dealing both with the lack of availability. Ransomware gets ready to encrypt your files. You can't use them. Stuxnet made sure they weren't going to have a nuclear program. So you could have the discussion that it was along the lines of lack of availability for your data and hardware. So, but Stuxnet wasn't asking for money. They were just there to cause some damage. Kind of like what NotPetya did, right? That was the one that basically had
and NotPetya.
Yeah.
WannaCry and NotPetya were both.
Yeah. But one of them, either NotPetya or Petya, I always mix them up, but one of them killed the hard drives. It wiped the drives. It declared ransomware, but the wallet didn't exist, and it wiped your drives. And then you had, WannaCry and Petya that came out around the same time that were encrypting everything. And WannaCry basically added in the worm. So once it infected your system, it then worked its way around all throughout the networks, and infecting every system it could find, and then charging for that, which brought the NHS to a grinding halt in the summer of 2017. It's one of those things. I remember where I was when WannaCry came out and I first saw it.
I think I think if you're in cyber, we all remember when it came out. My question is the reason I consider at least Stuxnet to be the mother of all ransomwares is because it's the master strain of everything that came thereafter.
Okay. You're not talking about the code itself. You're just talking about the concept.
Well, I'm talking about the code. I'm talking from a technology perspective. Stuxnet was WannaCry and NotPetya were based off of Stuxnet code. I mean, once people realized what Stuxnet was and took it and started dismembering it, they created something absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was just incredible in its capabilities and sophistication, and just opened up the door for so many other people with regards to different attacks. Yeah, it was. It was. Stuxnet when it came out. I remember exactly what I was doing, where I was, what was in the phone in my hand, the little flip phone with the text messages that I got. Stuxnet infected Siemens PLC. And I'm like, uh-oh, this won't be good. And then I went on stage and gave a 30-minute presentation on cybersecurity, only to come off to discover that I had a couple missed calls from the boss. So yeah, things got crazy for us after that.
So
but
when you look at kind of that evolution, right? So we talk about ransomware in a financial perspective, and we'll definitely get into that.
yeah,
But its origin wasn't necessarily always financial. A lot of it was interruption, right? A lot of it was creating and sowing some level of chaos as well.
yeah. I mean, ransomware was the gotcha of attacks. It was because you knew you got attacked. I mean, you and I have, and all other folks have said for years, you have either been breached and you know it, or you have been breached and you don't know it. Well, ransomware was the kind of attack that said, hey, you've been breached and now you know it. Usually, a lot of the time where you had a lot of the attacks going on where you had nation states coming in and being very stealthful. That was the story for years. I remember from like 2010 after Stuxnet, up until like 2016, 17, you heard about discoveries of data breaches. That's how you knew you'd been breached, because your data was ending up online, or you had discovered, data exfiltration going out your network. As long as you were an organization that didn't have anything sensitive that, related to people, privacy, PII, that kind of stuff, then you kept it quiet and you didn't have to do anything. Nowadays with ransomware, the guys are posting your data online for you, and then there's no way of hiding it.
So you're right. There's no way of hiding it, and now they're shaming you.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like they're no offense. I feel like they've taken the Obama cyber playbook and turned it upside down. Because if people don't remember this, President Obama's cyber playbook was naming and shaming.
Right.
Like he never wanted to do a retaliatory cyber attack.
Right.
So he'd just be like, these guys hacked us. It's their names. We're going to name and shame them.
Yep.
I don't know how effective that was. But now it's very effective for the cyber criminals on their victims because they're impacting business. And a ransomware attack could be construed as an IT disruption somewhere, but not always the other way around.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the criminal groups or the cyber criminals that are out there, there's one group, I think it's Maze, on there. A lot of these, the criminal ones that are leaking the data, leakware, whatever, the extortion is my opinion, is what it should be, is what it is. But a lot of them are now having their own websites. They're all onion sites, but they have their website where they post the data. And Maze News on theirs, their slogan is keeping the world secure. And another one of their comments that they have on their website is, we're going in and exposing these companies for weak security. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. They're finding ways in, whether that's through RDP, whether that's external vulnerabilities, or my favorite topic, phishing. They're getting in through, phishing attacks and getting in to show these organizations, hey, you're not as secure as you think you are. It's kind of, the wrong way to go about it, but it is that public shaming that happens. But they're getting in, and now they're getting in and sticking around a lot longer to see what they can steal, or eventually work up to a business email compromise. That's another story for another day.
Well, we've got plenty of time for our episode today to talk about everything, folks.
Oh, well, there we go then. All right.
I will say this, though, and thankfully, I won't open my mouth to the world, but if you watched our first episode of Tech Corner, we had dolphins trying to mess things up. The dolphins can't get between Georgia and Florida. So there you go, dolphins, in your face, you evil, cute animals.
Oh, geez.
But so talking of the Maze gang, Maze ransomware, right?
Yep.
Naming, shaming, trying to put out data that essentially evolved from the Sony breach. I think everyone remembers the Sony breach.
Oh, yeah.
It was somehow attributed to North Korea.
Yep.
But it wasn't really North Korea. North Korea ended up buying the data. Do you know the story of the Sony breach? Because I did a whole podcast on it early on. We're 2 years old in this podcast. About a year and 9 months ago, we did 2 podcasts on the truth behind the Sony breach. Fact-based discovery truth.
Right. So I have my students, one of their first assignments in the course that I teach called Identity Security. Sorry, shameless plug. But one of the first assignments that they do is analyze an attack, and I have 20 different data breaches or attacks that they can choose from, and one of them is always Sony. So I know the story, but go ahead, enlighten me with some interesting facts that we may not know.
Sony Breach was an internal job. That's how they got in. It was the Guardians of Peace.
Yeah.
Right?
But it was an inside job. Okay.
So they fired their IT admin.
Okay.
The lady sold her credentials and disappeared.
Wow.
No one knows where she is. Last sighting of her was crossing the border into Mexico.
Okay.
You can't write this in a movie. 100% true. She's on the FBI's most wanted list for selling her credentials.
Okay.
But this goes into the internal aspect of Sony. No one disabled her credentials. They left her credentials on.
Yep.
No one changed her password. Also a Sony problem.
Yep.
That breach would have been prevented by someone going, hey, we fired our IT admin. Let's change her password.
Disable. Yeah. Yeah. Or disable the account, right?
If for whatever reason you want to keep her account active because of whatever access she has.
Yeah.
Change your password.
Change the password. Change the user account. Yeah. There's all kinds of things you could do. They just kind of left it. That's unfortunate for them.
So everyone remembers that part of that breach was that they were negotiating with the hackers.
Right.
There's emails back and forth. When the hackers couldn't get money from Sony, they went shopping that data. And the North Koreans at the time, because of the movie, The Interview, were like, we'll buy it and play off of that. And so everyone attributes it to the fact that the North Koreans were so brazen to hack Sony because of The Interview. It had nothing to do with Joe Rogan, with what's his face?
Kim Jong-un?
No, the 2 actors there. It was like James. It's another James.
James Franco and Seth
Rogen.
Yep.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with those two guys.
They ended up releasing like all kinds of movies and scripts and all kinds of stuff because of that. Yeah, that was a pretty intense data breach. And then of course their machines were all hit with with that screen. They couldn't do anything, so they had to go spend all that time and effort to wipe their systems and get them all reloaded and all that good stuff. Yeah, oy vey.
2 oy veys in today's podcast from you, James. I wonder how many more we're going to get today.
No, now I'm self-conscious of it.
No, don't be. I love the oy veys. Like, that's great. It's great to have oy veys.
It just goes to show how much fun we have in this industry.
Well, we have a very, very interesting industry.
Yeah.
Right? We're in an industry where security is a very important issue. It's taboo in a lot of circles. People don't want to talk about it.
Yep, right.
Security is hidden in the back of the building, or in the case of the city of Atlanta, in the basement.
We're bolted on, not baked in.
Yeah. And
I think that is changing a little bit. Not as quick as we would expect, but I do believe that more and more organizations are coming aware of having to implement more security. Not as much as the security people would like to have, but I would imagine that the C-suites, the CISOs, CEOs, board of directors, they're aware of the dangers, or becoming a lot more aware of the dangers. And of those that are ignoring it or not worrying about it, they will eventually one day. So
yeah, there's
time will tell.
Time will tell. I think there's a major kind of miss with how security sells itself within an organization, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of the time and I know from personal experience, you go in and you're trying not to spout all the technical terms about threat and risk and the vulnerabilities and everything else. But a lot of the times they're dealing, the C-suite, the board of directors, they're dealing with so much more than just worrying about security. They're dealing with the whole company and profit loss and, all the other stuff. Supply chain, and you come in, so you have to be able to talk their language so they understand. So you are talking about risk, and you're talking about loss of revenue, and the potential of that happening, and what it means to the brand that we get hit. But I think about, and those are the conversations or the tips that I've heard over the years. And then I sit there and I go, all right, I'm going to flash back to 2014. That was a fun year because we had a department store that's based out of Minneapolis that got looted last week. We got a big orange do-it-yourself lumber store that got breached, but they're still around. People worry about brand reputation and loss of revenue. They probably did take a hit. I gotta imagine they did, but they're still successful and moving on. So I think if I'm on the board of directors and I go, okay, so we get hit with the data breach, what's that really cost us? How long before we can recover? What's the collateral damage we can take on that and work to recover? Kind of makes for an interesting statistic. Some businesses do lose it. They go bankrupt and they're out. CISOs lose their jobs, CEOs lose their jobs, but a lot of the time, now I think a lot more people are taking the due diligence and they end up getting hit. And it's like, okay, well, we had all this in place. We still got breached. Now we're going to spend the 18 million or 250 million to put in all the top level security.
Do you see the same fallout from ransomware as you do from a breach?
Because this is still fresh. I mean, you think about ransomware we've been dealing with for the last few years. They would get decrypted. People would have backups. They would restore. There have been some businesses hit with ransomware, and they end up laying off employees because their systems are down and they can't work for 3 days, and they end up laying people off. There have been companies that have gone out of business because they got hit with ransomware. But you look at a manufacturing company over in Norway, Norsk Hydro. They're manufacturing aluminum, and they got hit with ransomware. It didn't impact all their systems, but it did impact production systems and a lot of their back office systems. It took them a good week to get back up and running, which is kind of the average, between 7 and 12 days, depending on how many systems. But there have been companies that have shut down and been ruined by it. Now, with what's been going on with the leakware, I haven't seen much on the follow-up. It would be interesting to see, because I've seen doctors' offices, they've been hit with ransomware, their data's been stolen, and they go to the owner of the practice and say, all right, you're going to pay us so much money. And they go, forget it, we're not paying it. And they go, okay. And then they've got all that patient data they've exfiltrated. They now go to the patients and go, hey, guess what? We've got all this information about you. Give us $300 and we will delete it and give you we won't release it. And people have paid that as well. The cyber criminals that are out there, they're just looking for the buck. They want to see how they can make money off of it. And if they're not going to do it, getting it from the organization, they'll go after whoever has the data. Now we're even hearing of them auctioning it off to different groups. We had that one law firm hit last month that had a whole bunch of celebrity data. And we're starting to ransom it off, or starting to auction it off now to a variety of criminal groups. I haven't had a chance to follow up and do any more research on it, but I got to imagine they're going to have people that are going to be interested in buying that, either other criminal groups or other interested parties, we'll say. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up coming up with that. But overall, I think with the leakware and stuff going on, well, that just reminded me, last summer we had down here in Florida, down near Palm Beach, there was one of the small cities that are down there, their municipality, their systems got hit. And one of the systems was the police department's evidence server. And it got hit with ransomware, and they didn't pay, and then they lost all the data. Well, the data that was on that police department's evidence server had evidence that was going to convict 6 people that had been arrested on felony charges. They had to let them go. So now we're talking about putting criminals back on the street because of getting hit with ransomware. If people are dying because systems go down in a hospital environment, now you're really, it's getting a lot worse. Now lives are at stake, criminals are going free. So now it kind of takes it to a different level where these cyber criminals are going out and getting money, but now it could be an impact to human life, to the community as well, which kind of raises the bar up a little higher.
You bring up some very, very interesting stories, because if even if you talk about the latter, right, criminals, and yep. I mean, the cost to taxpayer alone is insane. The police officers who investigated the crime, all the work that it took in there, the prosecution, everything just gone in a minute.
Yeah. Ironically, 51% of the public sector organizations that were hit. I'm losing the stat now. Sorry. There was the public sector is more of a target for these attacks because, you look at small, medium business, enterprise organizations. Enterprise organizations have a SOC. They got their security operations center, so they can monitor their network. They've got backups, hopefully testing, but they can monitor their networks and see a phishing attack coming in. There's technology that's there that allows them to be able to monitor the network, see the phishing and things happening to the endpoints. Medium businesses can rely on a managed security provider, and get a similar aspect and protection. Small businesses, not so much. They're heavily targeted. Most of the time, the criminal groups are just coming in. They want the data, hold it for ransom. And then again, like some of the practices going after the patients. But the public sector, which is kind of like a medium business, depending on how many people are working in there, they don't have the resources, they don't have the budgets, because a lot of the time we're seeing the budgets are cut, they're restricted, they're not able to implement security measures as quick as private companies. So they are, in a lot of the studies that I've seen, a lot of the public sector organizations are more targeted. And so it's important that those groups are taking, if they can't handle the technology or get enough technology in there to monitor and protect the networks, then they got to rely on the people. Because ransomware comes in through one of 3 ways, right? It comes in through RDP sessions or a software vulnerability, brute force attack, or it's coming in through a human element, through a phishing attack. And if you can get the humans trained and get them aware so they don't fall victim to the scams, then that's kind of where your public sector really needs to focus on, because security awareness training, shameless plug, but security awareness training in the grand scheme of things is a lot cheaper than some of the blinky boxes. No offense to the technology companies. What they do is fantastic, but sometimes it's a lot cheaper for them to getting the people up to speed, educated and aware than having the more technology. But I'm biased by it because I love to educate and talk to people about security.
Right, but don't you feel like that varies based on the size of the company? I think in a small business setting where you've got 50 to 60 employees, that's more applicable than maybe a 70,000 person workforce. Because how can you really properly train 70,000 people, irregardless to how many James McQuiggens you've got? Or right. How great, you're a CISO, you've been a CISO, I'm a CISO. We've all done phishing tests with online trainings after it. I'm going to say the secret. I'm going to say it out loud. We all know it's only about 15 to 20% effective. We know that most online trainings are just next, get past the test, get your 80%, move on. the employees don't really pay attention. I'm talking about large size organizations.
Yep.
I'm not talking about the small, mid-sized companies, the family atmosphere, the culture of the organization. I go enterprise. I'm going, 25,000 employees across, 20 different countries.
Right.
Correct.
Yep.
You have way more experience on this than me. Is that assessment true, or is it, or am I off base here?
No. It's you're hitting the nail on the head, and that's kind of that next phase now of the security awareness and training programs that need to happen. Yes, you would used to have it where you'd have a PowerPoint presentation, and I would be the one as well. You'd go around to the different departments and you would give a presentation over a lunch hour, a lunch and learn or something, and they'd be like, "Great, thanks, appreciate it, good info, okay," and 2 weeks later you hear of something. Now it's got to kind of step the game up, and you hit the nail on the head. They're going to know about it, but what makes them care? They're going to, just because they know it doesn't mean they're going to take that action. But if they can take that action, that drives home the point that much more. And so you've got to be able to, whatever training you do is got to be, it can't be just PowerPoint presentations and click, next. It's got to be more to it. And one of the things, and I think Jackie talked about it as well, and the poster's over my shoulder. But The Inside Man is a series that we created at KnowBe4, and I apologize for the shameless plug, but it was when I came on board with the company and I saw The Inside Man, the first series that got created last year, the interesting thing about it was, and I actually got told about it before I got hired on by KnowBe4 by one of our customers who was a friend of mine, the company she worked at. When she knew I was going to work for KnowBe4, she's like, "Can you find out about season 2 of Inside Man?" I'm like, "Inside Man? What are you talking about?" Inside Man was a 12-episode series with a overlying arc of a story of a guy that breaks into a company. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but it's story first, lessons second is kind of the easy way to explain it. It's almost like watches like a Netflix series. It's really, really good. But you get engrossed in the story, but then you're kind of seeing, oh yeah, he's talking about a password manager. Oh yeah, he's tailgating. Oh yeah, make sure you keep your badge protected. Don't share your passwords, kind of thing. And each episode, it's only like 8 minutes for each episode, but each one has 3 security tips, and you get those at the end of the episode after you've watched it. So you get a little bit of entertainment, and then you get the security lessons that get reinforced from what you learned in your training. So you go, oh yeah, I remember that. Okay. So it's not a matter of just having to, give them the 30-minute presentation. You've got to continually be reinforcing it throughout the year, whether it's newsletters, whether it's videos. The friend of mine that asked me about Inside Man, once I knew the second series was coming, I of course let them know. But the cool thing was they would do Friday afternoons. They were a small organization, less than 100 people. But on Friday afternoons, they would get together in the conference room and they would watch the next episode. And they did this for the 12 weeks. So once they knew the new series was coming out, they were like, all right, here we go. We can do Friday afternoon, Inside Man again. So, but it generated interest. They were interested, because they wanted to see the story, but then, what are the security tips that are coming out of it? And that's kind of that next level that organizations need to be doing with their security training programs, is getting it so that it sticks more with the employees, that they have a reason to care. You're going to do those phishing assessments as well, because that is how they're not going to fall prey to a real phishing attack that comes in. And policies have to be created. If people are going to be doing these assessments and people keep clicking on the link and there's no consequence or retribution for it, then the phishing assessment is pointless. There has to be a policy that backs it, that says you click on the link, okay, you're going to have some remedial training now. They're going to hate it, but you're going to need to do it because you didn't pay attention to the emails. They do it again. All right, we're sitting down with your manager. You do it again, we're bringing in the CISO. You do it again, we're bringing in the CEO. You do it again, there's nothing more we can do. We've had everybody in the company talk to you. You're not wanting to protect the organization because you're falling victim to these. If this had been a criminal that did it, then we would now be exposed. And, it's almost as bad as leaving the front door open to the organization. You're letting people tailgate in with you. That's what essentially clicking on those links, opening those attachments is doing. And so it's a matter of getting the human element to feel like they're a part of the organization and being able to protect the company. And if you can do that, now you can easily do that, like, as you said already, with, 100-person organization, 500-person organization. You get up into the thousands and hundreds of thousands. Yeah, now it gets trickier, and you're going to have a lot more people spread around, maybe even each in each office, to be able to help support that overall. But days of PowerPoint presentations need to go, if they're not gone already, and get it to do, the new school of security training.
We live in a different era.
Yes.
COVID-19 has obviously changed a lot of it.
Yeah. A lot more people working from home.
It's changed the technology discussion.
Yep.
From a secure network to having to log into a secure network. Almost now everyone's a traveling salesman.
Yeah.
Right?
A stay-at-home traveling salesman?
A stay-at-home traveling salesman that is not in an airport and not in a Marriott.
Or Hilton.
Or Hyatt. But it's very different now in that aspect, and ransomware is also changing because of that. Ransomware is significantly different because of that. I mean, we're seeing the amount of phishing on mobile devices go up by almost 70% in the last 3 months.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more of that. Yeah.
So kind of going back, and we've diverted, and I want to kind of take us back here, kind of a little bit about ransomware. I think that's really, really important. I think everyone who's tuning in, who's listening, who's watching, realizes, wait a minute, you guys have spoken we've touched the surface of ransomware, but you haven't dug deep. Why don't you give us a little bit, James, on how you see ransomware evolve over the next 6 to 12 months, if you can?
Yeah, I mean, recently, we look back at Maze comes out the end of 2019, and they have the leakware. And now you've got like 5 or 6 other groups that are now doing the same thing. They're following the same TTP, essentially, the tools, techniques, and procedures. And now I learned today, learned it last night and following up today, that several of these criminal groups are now teaming up, where they're kind of ransomware as a service has already been around, but now like these 5 of them are teaming up. And I made a comment earlier today that was for something at through work to a news site where they were asking about these organizations teaming up, and is it a good thing? And for me, I look at it as, I think each of these different groups have a specialty. One is really good at doing the phishing attacks and creating those emails, crafting those emails to be believable. And then you've got another group that's really great with the exploits and the 0 days. And then you got another group that has got a way to be able to find the, hidden drives and directories and get into Active Directory and disable antivirus on systems and keep from being discovered. And with this group of 5 of them that have come together, it's kind of like you got level 1, level 2, and level 3 technicians that you would hear about within like a help center called help desk. And I even know that even within nation state organizations or groups that they have, their different technicians. The one tech tries to get in, he tries all of his tricks and stuff, everything in his bag of tricks, his toolbox, doesn't work. The second level guy comes in, he tries something, boom, he gets in. So first guy goes back in, keeps going. Sometimes he'll come along, he'll be stuck at something, and then they got to bring in the level 3 techs. I've dealt with that through help desks and, other tech support organizations as well throughout my career. And you've got your different levels of expertise. And I think with these groups of criminal groups that are coming together, they're kind of bringing them together to kind of merge, hopefully not a merge and acquisition, but, merge to bring all their skills together to become even more dangerous. We're now seeing last month, one particular group, ACO, I think it's ACO, they did a double ransom. They said, all right, you're going to pay us and we'll give you the decryption key. And then you're also going to pay us so that we don't leak this data online. So it was like a double whammy. And now we're even seeing Revel auctioning off data, try to make money as well. And I honestly think it could start evolving to something else where to be something where, okay, great, you're going to pay us so you can decrypt your data. You're going to pay us so we don't leak it. And then you're going to pay us so that we'll delete the data, or that we don't auction it off or share it with somebody else. They might even get it to a subscription basis where, okay, we got about 3 terabytes worth of your data. We're going to charge you $10 or $100 for every gigabyte. And then you owe us that much. Or it'll be a subscription based that we don't leak your data. You paid us once. We'll just, now we're going to, you're going to pay us every month to have us leak it. And that, I got to imagine, depending on the data that they get, if it's intellectual property that's critical to a business and their organization, that they may end up having to pay, because are they willing to take that risk of losing their data being out there and posted? So, yeah, I can see the sweat. I kind of figure that's kind of my, looking in the glass bowl, the crystal ball. That's kind of my guess based on what I've seen, based on looking at the different ways that they do these attacks.
So as these guys get together, the one thing that they're not accounting for, the one thing they're betting on, they're gambling on, is that no one is going to come together to fight back. And I think there is going to be a fight back movement against these guys. And it is going to be of epic. It's going to be of biblical proportions, because it's not just up until right now. Cyber has been the 5th domain, right? Or the 6th domain. Is it the 5th or 6th domain?
Well, SpaceWorks, the Space Force, is that the 5th domain?
I don't know. What domain is cyber? I can't tell. And I'm not going to look it up real quick, but we have a bunch of domains of cyber.
Yes.
Cyber is one of those domains. There's what? Air, ground. Cyber's
water,
the 5th.
Navy, cyber. Well, cyber's part of the Air Force, right?
Cyber's the 5th domain.
5th domain. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Cyber's the 5th domain.
Ground, air, water,
space,
marine, space,
cyber.
And then cyber. 5th. All right. We'll say it's the 5th. Between you and me, we'll say it's the 5th.
And someone will probably comment and be like, "It's 6, you idiots."
And we will appreciate their feedback.
Yes, we will not delete your comment. We're going to see law enforcement come together. We're going to see a real space force in cyberspace.
Yeah.
Beyond Cyber Command, I think beyond the capabilities of the FBI and Secret Service who investigate and prosecute crime, there will be some sort of force that will be the underlayer of these guys. If it gets to a point where it's the greatest transfer, Frank Abagnale Jr. If you haven't seen Catch Me If You Can,
brilliant movie, love it.
The guy himself trumps the movie. If you haven't seen Frank Abagnale Jr. speak,
oh man, now it's on my list.
I saw him last year in Alabama, of all places. I was at a cyber conference in Alabama, drove out there, and I drove out there to simply see his keynote during lunch, which I did. It was fascinating. He's still working with the FBI.
Cool.
He spoke about the movie, his story, the inaccuracies of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bunch of those, Hollywood. But then he spoke about the greatest single transfer of wealth in human history and how we're watching it happen now with cybercrime.
Oh, okay.
And he said, we discount cybercrime because we feel like it has no victims. He goes, but it does.
Oh, yeah.
He goes, we discount cybercrime because we can't go across the border and arrest these folks. He goes, but soon we will. He goes, the difference in the globe today is that the U.S. might be one of the most, might be one of the last advanced countries to not have clear cyber law in our books. And that's because we have a bunch of idiots as elected officials. Quote me on it, put it out there, write it. They're all idiots.
Yeah. It takes a long time for the laws to catch up with the technology. That's the biggest problem.
But that's because we have idiots elected officials. Right? The moment you see a technology, write some sort of law. Anything. Basic. Anything. Something. Anything. Put it on paper.
Yeah.
Say, if you use this beyond its intended scope, it is illegal.
Yeah. And then somebody will argue, well, how do you know what's intended and everything else? But yeah.
That's fine, but leave that.
At least then you can argue it. Yeah.
At least then you can argue it.
Yep.
I know we both have friends in law enforcement where you hear them go, we know who it is. We can't charge him with anything.
Right.
Because the law is written in a way where to prosecute a crime, you have to prove something. And if you can't do that,
beyond a reasonable doubt,
you can't arrest, you can't do anything. And most of the time, even if you want to go and break it up, you're just letting them know that you're onto them, and then they change their TTPs.
Right.
And off they go.
Didn't they try to do a Law and Order Cyber? Oh, that was NCIS Cyber. I was going to say there should be a Law and Order Cyber,
I'm really into NCIS. And their most recent seasons, like I think 12, 13, 14, are very, very cyber-ish.
Oh, okay. I watched the New Orleans one. I like that one.
You got to watch the original NCIS.
Do I? Okay. Well, Scott Bakula's in the New Orleans one, and I long time Scott Bakula fan. Quantum Leap.
So he also does a few guest appearances as NCIS. I think like the way they got NCIS New Orleans in LA to really take off is they had him show up on the original NCIS.
Yep.
And I love the original NCIS one. I'm a big fan of Ziva David, and when they wrote her off the show, I was depressed as shit. I also love their portrayal of the Mossad. That was
okay.
It was the dumbest portrayal of the Mossad ever done in Hollywood. In Hollywood, but it was very interesting. Nonetheless, it had nothing to do with it. I was watching an episode yesterday, literally last night, kind of as I was dozing off to sleep, and what woke me up was they're like, "You got to stop the North Koreans from firing a nuclear missile," and he's like typing away on the computer, and you're like, "No, that's not how this works. That's
was there
not
two
cyber."
of them typing on the keyboard at the same time?
No, it's just one of them. But it was one person against an entire army of cyber criminals trying to stop a. Okay.
Oh, hey, Chuck Norris can do it, right?
Chuck Norris is a legend. You do not dare spoil Chuck Norris's good name.
Hey, he could do it. I watch Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yes. Walker, Texas. Delta Force.
Yeah.
They shot a Delta Force in Israel. I was a kid when they shot it. They shot it across the street from our house. I'll never forget it.
Oh,
it's one of the first ever Hollywood sets that came to Israel to shoot a movie. And he shot it, and I remember them shutting down the main boulevard from my house to shoot several of the scenes. And as a kid, I remember just standing there watching it, like in awe of Chuck Norris and Hollywood, and like the caravans and the equipment and the effects. Was very, very cool.
Very cool.
Well, we're almost out of time, James.
I'm going to leave you with one last thought.
Do it, all you, buddy. Sign us off.
All right. So this group of cyber criminals were trying to get away from the police. And lo and behold, they did. Do you know how they did it?
How?
They ransomware. And I bow and end scene.
Dad jokes. Jokes.
Yes, it is.
I love it.
It's been one of my favorites for a while, and whenever I do cyber ransomware talks, or talk about ransomware, I always throw that in somehow. Depending on how the audience is, I'll open up with it, I'll end with it. So. But yeah.
First of all, a big thank you to Nova for sponsoring today's episode.
Big thank you.
Logo on the screen in front of you. They're also mentioned in the comments below. And As we kind of sign off today, I want to say the following. Ransomware is definitely a challenge. We've got a lot of work to do there, but we can overcome it as a community. Education, awareness, know what you do before you click, understand phishing. That's how all ransomware starts. It's phishing. It's nothing else. It's you clicking, opening an email, downloading an attachment, visiting a site, clicking on an ad. It's how they get in.
Yep.
With that being said, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching Tech Corner today. My name is James Azar, James McQuiggen from Know Before. Make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars, like, talk to our partners over at Know Before to have amazing cyber tools, folks. Amazing free tools, free awareness tools on their website. Lots of free tools. So make sure you check them out. Until next time, folks, stay cyber safe, and we'll be back with more then.